Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. I want to continue with what I've been talking about for the last couple of videos. And last video I shared with you, I asked you this question actually, and the question was this: what do you believe? I ended that video talking about the parable of the sower. And I shared with you the four seeds that get sown in the parable of the sower and why, in Jesus' explanation, why they're taken away or why they don't grow and eventually bear fruit. So to just kind of go through each thing here, Jesus talks about that this parable, farmer goes out to sow seeds and he's throwing the seeds everywhere. And some of the seeds fall in different areas. And so, some on rocky soil, some on good soil, and all the different ways. And ultimately, he explains to the disciples, because they come to him, they go, can you explain this thing? And he says, if you don't understand this parable, you won't understand all of the parables. Which means I don't think we understand the parables. We read them like we were reading an old wives' tale or a story that, oh yeah, I can glean on my life and apply it. And that is true. But what Jesus is saying, if you listen very closely, he says, the kingdom is like. You want to know what God's kingdom is about? Again, it's not about us going to heaven and the kingdom. If that were the case, and sadly, a lot of times that's what religion ends up. We just try to get people to make decisions about Jesus and they miss the kingdom. They think the kingdom is dying and going to heaven. And that's what we teach. Hey, what's going to happen if you die? And are you going to go to heaven? Or the alternative. And Jesus didn't teach anything like that. He taught about the kingdom coming here and how we can be part of God's kingdom here, now. That's still the good news. That's still the gospel. Jesus dying on the cross and rising from the dead is I've sealed the deal. I've made this happen. It's finished. It's the Magna Carta, it's the Declaration of Independence, it's the done deal. That's sealed about what he preached and taught to people, that the kingdom is here. And there are benefits for us to be in the kingdom. And we miss out on those because we don't understand the parable of the sower. The seeds are thrown, and what the seeds are the word. Jesus is not saying the physically written Bible that we now hold in our hands, though he was referencing, I'm sure, the Tanakh, what he would be referencing as the word, but he would also be referencing just the word that we receive into our spirit. We hear about the kingdom. Right now, I'm sharing about the kingdom. And some of you might be hearing this and you're like, oh yeah, that sounds great. And immediately, the deceiver will come. Our adversary, the spiritual beings that are in the heavenly realm, that are right here around us. It's not about whether we feel them, see them, or anything. There's a spiritual realm that's around us. And they come almost immediately and go, what Ron's talking about is a bunch of junk. And you're like, yeah, you're right. He's off base here. And yet, that's exactly what the Apostle Paul talked about. He says, we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, rulers of this dark age, right? That's not verbatim quoted. You're wrestling. Our fight is not against the people that we come into contact with. Our fight is against spiritual beings. It's the same fight. I always go back to Genesis. God's plan is Genesis 1 and 2 and Revelation 21 and 22. Okay, that's God's plan. All the in between is humanity and spiritual beings rebelling and messing it up, and God dealing with that in between. So God's plan, a spiritual being says to humanity, the male and female, Adam and Eve, and deceives them, steals the word, is what happens. The spiritual being questions God, what God said to Adam and Eve. Did he really say that? He stole their word from them. And they listen to another spiritual being. God is a spiritual being. The great God is a spiritual being. They listen to a different one. And that's what happens with us. It's the same thing. And Jesus is sharing this parable, and he's explaining it now to the disciples, that the enemy comes along and steals the word from us, steals what God has promised to us, steals away almost immediately with doubtful thoughts that, well, God, used to heal people. I call BS on that. And when religious Christianity teaches against that, they are teaching against God's word that, God doesn't do that anymore. Maybe in special occasions. Just stop that. That is ungodly thought. That is religious nonsense. God, how do you quote, Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever, but you don't believe that it's the same? Let's get serious about our faith and quit allowing the enemy to steal God's word from us. There are promises from God to us, and I included, miss them because I get the word stolen from me. Don't allow the enemy to steal this word from you. What God promised and said to those in his time when he walked on the earth, when God walked on the earth as a man named Jesus Christ, Jesus the Christ, meaning he's the one, he's the Messiah. Those words of what he spoke, when people were healed miraculously, when lives were transformed, when needs were met miraculously, feeding 5,000, turning fish and bread into a meal for thousands of people. That's real. And it's real for now. Nothing's changed. So don't let the enemy steal that. There's going to be voices that come. Just like there's a voice of the Spirit of God speaking to us, there's a voice of other spiritual beings trying to speak to us and rob us. And it's learning how to listen only to God's word that are truth to our lives. I want to bless you with that today. Don't let this word get stolen. I love you. I bless you with health and healing, wisdom and knowledge, power and prosperity, and the gifts and the fruits of the Spirit of God to be evident and flowing in your life. I pray you have a fantastic week.